The spirit of medicine hat flows through their veins. Seriously, we got them tested as part of the interview process. KJ and Kirby in the morning on My 96.
As we talked about earlier, Robb Nash is on the show here, a Canadian singer in the city to speak to local youth about, among other things, I'm sure, suicide and hopefully instilling purpose in their lives. Robb, how are you this morning?
Hey, it's good to be alive, man.
You know, talking about suicide, I mean, for us on the radio talking about it, it is a delicate subject, and we feel we have to tiptoe around it all the time. But I really get the impression that, you know what, you say screw it. You attack it, you approach it head on.
Yeah, well, you know, we've been going on this school tour for a while, and we see so many people dealing with these issues. I had those same thoughts myself, and I wish somebody would have talked to me about it. And, you know, after going and doing presentations at schools all over Canada, you know, we've had the chance to go to schools that have never seen a suicide, and we get to talk to them about prevention and let them know of the dangers that are out there and make sure people know that help is available. We'd way rather be doing shows like that than the ones that we get called to right after a school has seen a suicide, and now we got to go back there and teach the kids what to do now that they've already seen tragedy. You know, some people think that you have to go through tragedy, you have to hit rock bottom to learn life lessons, and I completely disagree with that. I think we can learn from the stories of the people around us, and that's why we are sharing stories on this tour.
Hey, Robb, you know, a lot of parents are listening right now. The kids are basically in school right now, so parents are listening right now, and they want to find out a little bit about you, like who you are and what your thing is. And so, I mean, this all started innocently enough. You had a love of music, but it took a car accident to really change everything.
Yeah, although, when I was 17, I was actually found dead on arrival in a car accident. No pulse, not breathing. My parents got the nasty call. They said, "We're sorry, your son was killed today." And I was brought to the hospital, and as you can tell from my voice, I came back to life. And they ended up putting my head back together with metal, my chest, my shoulder. And but some people tell my story, and they think I woke up enlightened, wanting to change the world. That wasn't the case at all. I woke up very angry and bitter. For a year and a half, I didn't want to be alive. You know, and I had to try to figure out the reason that this happened to me. And I went into this dark and bitter place. But it was only about a year and a half, 2 years in that I realized, you know what, we're all going to have tough days, and we got to decide what we're going to do with that. And so I decided to, you know, stop being angry at life and everything that happened to me. And I realized that not a lot of people get a second chance, and I want to share my stories so other people wouldn't have to die like I did before they started to live. And the first prompting I felt in my heart at that point wasn't to move to Africa and build a well or something. The first real prompting that I felt was to phone the semi-driver that hit me and tell him that I was alive. And it took a little while to get his phone number, but finally I got a hold of this guy from the States, and I found out that he hadn't driven a vehicle since the day of the accident. He was seeing a psychologist. He was on depression medication, and we talked for hours. This guy was set free because he didn't know I'd come back to life. And when I hung up the phone, I thought, whoa, that felt cool. And I realized I wanted to tell my story as often as I could because I wondered how many other people were out there like me going through those dark thoughts and they're not talking about it. So honestly, I didn't really ever want to be a musician. Music was my worst mark in school, but I realized music was a good way to tell a story. So that's why I started the band. We had a few top 10 hits on the radio. And but a few years ago, I got offered this Johnny Cash style of tour, going through prisons, youth detention centers, native reserves, and schools to tell my story. So I ripped up my record deal to do this tour, and it was one of the best decisions I've ever made.
All right. Hey, Robb, now I'm speaking as a parent here of somebody that's going to be checking out your appearance today. Now, I got a couple of boys, and they're happy. And they're cheery, and they seem well-adjusted, and they have friends, and you know, I like to think that they've never even thought about suicide. Is there a danger in surrounding these well-adjusted, happy boys with all this talk about suicide today?
Well, I'll tell you what. If you don't think they already know that it's an option, you're fooling yourself, because, you know, some people think, let's not talk about it, and then nothing will happen, no bad things will happen. You know, we just got called to a school where an 8-year-old took their life. You know, with social media and everything that's going on, people are aware of what's going on. People know what the options are. I think parents would be pretty shocked at the thoughts that kids are already having. You know, we were just at a private Catholic middle school where they lost an 11-year-old. And the school was totally rocked, and they had no idea. They had never spoke about it in their school, and now they were forced to deal with this issue right after tragedy, and that's not the way it's supposed to be done. And through social media and everything, like we've talked with over 985,000 students on this tour. And I'm not going to lie, just like you in the beginning, I didn't want to go to middle schools. I didn't want to go to the young kids. But as we did this tour, we started seeing that the issues are younger and younger than you would actually think. And the stats for teenagers in Canada is 1 in 5 have actually considered suicide and have mental illness of some sort. Not to mention the fact that 35% of those have actually thought out a game plan of how they could take their life. And so they're going to be learning about this stuff through their friends, through social media, through the internet, through TV shows that they're watching. They know it's out there. And so that's why we decided to address these topics. But you nailed it. It's a very sensitive topic. You have to do this properly. And one of our biggest issues when it comes to the topic of mental illness and suicide is everybody only shares the tragic stories. You know, you only hear about the kids that have taken their lives, and then we hear about their story afterwards. For us, we have this crazy balance in our show where we spend most of our show talking about students that once had those thoughts, that were once suicidal, but they're still here today, that they're walking, they beat those voices out of their head, and they were able to still be here to this day, you know? And that's what I think needs to happen when it comes to the toxic mental illness.
We're talking
the stories of good and bad.
We're talking to Robb Nash. He's in town today to speak to our youth about suicide and you know, just reinstilling a reason to live with our youth. Kirby, over to you.
And Rob, I mean, for those of you who haven't seen your wicked tats on your arm, can we talk about that for a second? Because you talked about kids that are still here today because they spoke up and they got the help that they needed. And a lot of those kids have their names tattooed on your arm.
Yeah. Well, what happened was one day we were called to a school in Ontario where they had lost a young lady to suicide. She had a suicide pact with one of her friends, and the principal said, we don't know who it is. So they were about to lose a second student. And so we went and spoke to that school, and for the first time I spoke directly about suicide at that show. And after the show, this young girl came up to me, and she handed me her suicide note. This girl was sitting in class with her suicide note in her pocket. And then it was a few shows later that we focused on that topic again, and a young man came up and gave me his suicide note. And then I started talking with the police and different experts within mental illness, and we found out that on average, somebody writes their suicide note 2 to 3 months before they take their life, waiting for somebody to push them over the edge or waiting for somebody to reach out and say it's going to be okay. So we focused on that. Now we've actually been handed 613 suicide notes after shows like what we're going to do today for your middle schools in Medicine Hat. 613 students were sitting with suicide notes in their pockets in class.
Wow.
And so many of these students have now actually tattooed the lyrics of our songs on their arms where they used to cut, where they used to insert their needles. And that meant so much to me that they would think that I am that much a part of their life. They tattoo our words on their arms. That we actually, this summer, I had my tattoo artist take all the signatures from all those suicide notes that I've been handed, and I tattooed them on my arm. You know, and
it's incredible. RobbNash.com, ROBB Nash, RobbNash.com. Speaking today to youth at the Esplanade. It sounds like it's going to be a great show. Unfortunately, it's kind of a private gig, so it's only open to those students. But if you want to connect with Robb, you can do it through his website or Twitter, Robb Nash, LOA. On Twitter there, and I'm sure he would love to talk to you. Hey, Robb, I got to let you go here. I know you got a busy day going on here, but I've got your song "One Last Breath" queued up, ready to go. Tell me a little bit about it. What is the message?
Well, and I do want to let everyone know, by the way, that we make sure every one of these kids gets follow-up help to make sure they got the support that they need after they hand us a suicide note. But yeah, this song, "One Last Breath," we usually open the show with this one. Coming out of death, waking up from my coma and finding out that I had died, I wrote this song because I had a lot of regrets for things that I had done and things that I hadn't done. So I wrote this song just realizing I've got one last breath to say sorry and try to make things right. And so this is one of our most moving songs that we've played, and it chokes me up almost every time.
Well, thank you, my friend, for making an impact. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have your say. Text now 458-3961. Let KJ and Kirby know what's on your mind. Start your day with a text to My 96.